It is Thursday, November 3rd. We're looking at the sun rising into a thin cloud. And as I was saying in the previous video clip, it calls to mind the winged sun symbols of ancient Egypt and Mesopotamia, to say nothing of some other ancient cultures that had winged sun symbols of one kind or another. And I was speaking about how the winged sun symbols of Egypt and Mesopotamia were almost certainly, I would say certainly actually myself, I would say that's what it is. But, you know, just to hedge our bets a little bit, say almost certainly inspired by a bird-like pattern in the sun's corona that can only be seen, of course, during a total solar eclipse. But essentially what it comes down to is during some total solar eclipses, the sun's corona takes on a very bird-like shape. The poles, the rays are sort of fanned out like the tail of a bird, and then the corona is concentrated into the equatorial regions on either side of the sun. And so this produces something that looks quite a lot like a bird. And this inspired, as I said, almost certainly not just the winged sun symbols of Egypt and Mesopotamia, but the phoenix myth, the solar falcon god Horus of Egypt, pretty well a whole flock of mythical birds and bird gods that are closely associated with the sun. Then other winged creatures, winged serpents, dragons, other winged mythical beings. You know, pretty much any mythical being that's closely associated with the sun and it's winged, you can be pretty sure that it was inspired by this. And certainly the phoenix. I mean, if you compare the phoenix myth to what happens in a total solar eclipse, there's a lot of overlap. There's only one phoenix. There's only one phoenix bird. There's not a whole bunch of phoenix birds. There's just one. It dies and is reborn on the same day. The interval between the death and rebirth of the phoenix, from one to the next, the lifespan of the phoenix, shall we say, is measured in centuries. There's different versions of the myth that give different time spans, between, the death and rebirth of the phoenix. But nevertheless, it's always measured in very long time spans. Some of these time spans are solar cycles. So what else in terms of phoenix? Those are the main things. And that's exactly what happens in a total solar eclipse. The sun appears to die and be reborn on the same day, in one day. That's what happens during the total solar eclipse. The time span between total solar eclipses in any one location is usually measured in centuries. On average, it's somewhere like 350 years. But because of the way celestial mechanics work, it's actually possible to have two total solar eclipses above the same area in fairly rapid succession, or even just a few years apart, even a year or 18 months. And I seem to recall seeing one instance where two total solar eclipses occurred above the same location in less than a year, but I'm not 100% sure about that. I'd have to verify that. But nevertheless, as a rule, total solar eclipses are quite rare, and as I said, on average, you're looking at approximately 350 years between total solar eclipses for any one place on the Earth. Getting back to what we're looking at here, as I said, we saw the sun rising up through the cloud, and I was talking about how it does call to mind the winged sun symbols of Egypt and Mesopotamia and so on. And what I was going to suggest is that once the idea of the winged sun was established, once you had the phoenix myth, once you had the winged sun symbols and so on, well then something like this, seeing the sun, coming up mixed with these very thin clouds, this I think would remind people of that. So you didn't necessarily always have to have a total solar eclipse to be reminded of the winged sun or phoenix. I mean, what we're looking at now is somewhat bird-like. I mean, it's not that bird-like, not nearly as bird-like as the total solar eclipse can appear to be. But nevertheless, it's a bit of a winged sun. So I think these cloud formations, the sun rising up through cloud formations like this, I think this probably would have reminded the ancient people, of the whole winged sun phoenix thing, So that's it. I just want to make that point. And I think we're going to wrap this up soon. Sun's definitely well above the horizon now. And I think once it gets above this cloud, I think I will end the video clip. Is there anything else I want to say about winged sun, phoenix, etc.? I don't know. I can't think of anything right now. I will say, actually, one of the winged creatures that I do believe was almost certainly, in fact, I believe it was. I mean, I'm saying almost certainly just to be somewhat academic, but I'm convinced myself that the total solar eclipse inspired the myth of Khepri, the scarab beetle god of Egypt. I've seen some images of Khepri that look very much like astronomical drawings of a total solar eclipse. Khepri is often depicted as sort of the winged sun. Instead of the sun, you have Khepri with the bird-like wings. So that there's a clear connection between Khepri, depictions of Khepri, and winged sun symbols in Egyptian religious art. And the myth of Khepri is, you have the scarab beetle, dung beetle, and it's rolling this ball of dung, and in the ball of dung are the larvae of the beetle, and the beetle buries the ball of dung in a hole, and then sometime later the larvae emerge. So everyone knows, everyone who knows the basic Khepri myth anyway, they know that the Egyptians had this concept of Khepri rolling the sun along. So that's established. That's everyone knows that. Who knows the Khepri myth? What I am saying is that I think there's a little bit more to the Khepri myth. I think the Egyptians drew a parallel between Khepri pushing the ball of the sun into a hole and burying it. To me, the pushing of the ball of the sun into a hole and burying it is a total solar eclipse. It's sort of an as above, so below correlation that the Egyptians made. And then when the larvae emerge sometime later, that is the rebirth of the sun after the eclipse. The sun emerging from behind the black disk of the moon. And so essentially what it comes down to is the Khepri myth. Khepri is the black disk of the sun seen during totality, but I think that black disk of the sun is also the whole. It's sort of like a layering of two concepts in one myth. So Khepri pushes the sun into the hole in the sky, as it were, the hole in the sky, because a total solar eclipse has been described, or I should say total solar eclipses have been described as a hole in the sky by quite a number of people. One of the perceptions of the black disk of the moon covering the sun is a hole in the sky. That's a fairly common conception that even modern eclipse observers remark. So I think the Egyptians saw the black disk of the moon as a scarab beetle, but also as a hole in the sky, and they put those two things together in terms of the Khepri myth. So I just wanted to make that point. So as I said, there's all kinds of mythical beings, winged mythical beings that are inspired by total solar eclipses. But I would say certainly the phoenix, certainly, and there's different versions. There's Chinese phoenix myth, Greek phoenix myth, Egyptian phoenix myth, the Bennu bird, and so on and so forth. Pretty much all of the bird symbolism in Egyptian religious art, as far as I'm concerned, it's all inspired by this bird-like pattern that's perceivable in the sun's corona. So the vultures, the solar falcon god Horus, the Bennu bird, the Ba bird representing the soul, and so on. All of these things, as far as I'm concerned, all arise out of the same phenomena, the bird-like pattern that's perceivable in the sun's corona during some total solar eclipses. And if you do want to see that bird-like pattern, in terms of comparatively recent eclipses that have good high-quality photos available, the 1991 total solar eclipse has the most bird-like pattern that I've seen. And in fact, it was seeing French astronomer Serge Kouchny's photo of the 1991 total solar eclipse in the May issue of the May 1992 issue of National Geographic magazine. That's when I saw the bird-like pattern, I immediately intuited that this was the inspiration for the Phoenix myth. When I saw this bird-like pattern in the sun's corona in Serge Kouchny's photo, I immediately thought that this is almost certainly the inspiration of the Phoenix myth. And subsequent research found plenty of evidence, supporting that, and found a whole flock of other mythical birds and bird gods that were almost certainly inspired by the same phenomena, and then that led me to Edward Walter Maunder's theory from the late 1800s that this winged sun pattern inspired the winged sun symbols of Egypt and Mesopotamia. I think it was in the early 1880s, I think 1883 or something like that, that Edward Walter Maunder first put forward this idea of his. He saw clear similarities between scientific astronomical drawings of some total solar eclipses, notably I would say the 1878 total solar eclipse, and I would say even more notably drawing of the 1878 total solar eclipse by one Etienne Leopold Trouvelot, Trouvelot. So he was a artist who drew a picture of the painted an image of the 1878 total solar eclipse, and this image shows the concentrated corona on either side like wings, and then it shows the rays, fanned out rays above and below the poles of the sun, looking very much like the tail of a bird. And I think it was this image, perhaps more than any other, although there certainly were others, that caused Edward Walter Maunder to hypothesize that it was this bird-like pattern that inspired the winged sun symbols of initially he saw the similarity with specifically Assyrian winged sun symbols, because they do show the tail of the bird. The Egyptian winged sun symbols almost never show the tail of the bird. It's just a solar disk with wings on either side of it. There's no bird tail, except in a few rare cases, I think. And I'm not even 100% sure about that, but I saw something recently that looked like an Egyptian winged sun symbol that seemed to have a bit of a bird tail to it. But in any case, the Assyrian symbols of Asher in the solar disk, they depict Asher in this pleated kilt, which is the bird tail. So it was these depictions of Asher, I think more than anything else, and other Mesopotamian winged sun symbols that Edward Walter Maunder noticed the clear similarity, and that caused him to come up with this hypothesis. Then in 1897, so sometime later, he published an updated version of his hypothesis, an old record of the corona. It was published in the January 1st, 1897 edition of Knowledge magazine. When I was doing my research, I was actually reading a book on the migration of symbols. I can't remember who the author was, but it wasn't, because there's 2 or 3, or possibly even more books, about the migration of symbols, called The Migration of Symbols. There's one very famous one, whose author I unfortunately don't remember name, but that one, when you say migration of symbols, people immediately think of this book, but it wasn't that one. It was another one. Anyway, in this book on the migration of symbols, I came across a page, and it showed an Egyptian winged sun symbol. It showed Mesopotamian winged sun symbol. I should say that these were line drawings, and small line drawings on the page. It wasn't a big book either. It was, maybe 8-inch high book, so not a big book. And it had these 3 little line drawings, and it even had a Polynesian winged sun type of thing, if I remember correctly. And it just mentioned, this hypothesis of Edward Walter Maunder, and noted that it was in this, as I said, Knowledge magazine, January 1st, 1897. And I was in the McGill University Library at the time when this happened, and I thought, gee, I wonder if that's in the library. Like, I wonder if that edition of Knowledge magazine is in the McGill University Library. And so I ran a search in the computer system, and sure enough, it was. The McGill University Library has quite a lot of old books, from the 1800s and so on, the 19th century, and I was happy to find Edward Walter Maunder's article in Knowledge very soon after getting that reference in the book on migration of symbols, and then with further looking into Edward Walter Maunder, then I later found this Sunday magazine, basically a Christian magazine, from the 1880s, I believe. I think it was 1883, give or take a year, but 1883 is sort of sticking in my head. So, in any case, this was the first that I know of publication of Edward Walter Maunder's theory. And as I said, at the time, it was talking only about the Assyrian winged sun symbols. But that, he came up with the idea in the early 1880s, and I think largely as a result of seeing this drawing of the 1878 total solar eclipse that was done by Etienne Leopold Trouvelot. Very nice image, and you can find it on the internet if you run a search. Etienne Leopold Trouvelot eclipse 1878. You can see that image. You can find it. And I see we're at about 15 seconds of recording time left, so we're going to wrap this up. And I'm sort of glad I put that out there, though. So, talking about the winged sun today.